Hi guys, and welcome to week 3 of the AdMech experience. This series in where over the space of 4 weeks I build and paint a 2000 point Adeptus Mechanicus army. Last week was infantry week and we went through 40 Scutari. This week is characters week where I'm doing all of the HQs and then the Cataphren destroyers as well. This was a really fun week, so sit back and enjoy the video. First things first, as with all the models in this army, a base coat of Warp Lightning contrast paint over all the cloaks and the fabrics. This colour is fast becoming one of my favourites, and I am definitely discovering more about contrast paints as I go along. The key thing for me to remember is that because they're not as thick as normal paints would be, they do take a bit of a longer time to dry if you put them on with the same sort of thickness, if that makes sense. And so it's important not to overwork the paint as it's drying, so I can avoid streaks and pooling where I don't want them to be. It becomes a bit more of an exercise of pushing paint around the model rather than painting onto the model. However, something I am experiencing is a difficulty to highlight the paints up. This is manageable by really just making sure I have a very strong zenithal and then applying the contrast paint, and it will show through. With the greens done, I wanted to get the skin tone on the Cataphrens down. For this, I wanted a neutral pale flesh tone, and achieved this with my usual recipe of Rakarth flesh and khaki. This creates a nice desaturated pallid tone, but keeps it away from a cool tone because the rest of the model is pretty warm. Possibly my favourite step in the process now, and it was time for the blue metals. Again, with the standard recipe now of Vallejo Air Silver and Scale 75 Huldra Blue, I painted all of the armour panels and various metal bits across the models, like legs and arms. To add a bit of variety and distinction to the models, I painted the rims and of the axes in lead belcher. This variety suits to break up the plain blue and adds a bit of definition to areas around the skulls in the axes, and so when I paint them gold, it will act as a framing sort of device. Now, everybody's favourite step is the Drakenhof Nightshade. Time to really blue up the metals and bring out a lot of that lovely detail. With all the base layers done now, it's time to move on to detailing, and there is a lot of it on these models. To begin with, I used Balthazar Gold, and it really pops because it's a very warm and orangey gold, which goes really well with blues. Orange and blue is a classic combination that just looks really good in pretty much any situation. I'm just going to jump in here and explain what's going on the screen. This was some of the finest detail painting I've personally ever done. Whilst it's not super fine detailing, I was doing this by looking at the camera screen and then just using the camera screen. This was a completely new way of painting for me, and it was a really enjoyable skill to learn. I can't wait to use this later on in more projects. Following on from the gold is to hit any and all of the lenses with red. I also hit the wax from the purity seals here, and later on came back through with a lighter red up into one of the corners to give it that lens effect. With the majority of the work now done, it was time to go through the guns and get them all done for the Cataphrens. I had these all magnetised. I had 6 plasma coverings and 6 grav cannons to get through. So I began with first blocking out all of the plasma areas with Stonewall Grey, so that when I come in later with the electric blue, you can really see that. Then Balthazar Gold on all the casings of the actual gun barrels themselves, and lead belcher for connecting bits and wires with the blue metal recipe for the part that attaches to the shoulder of the destroyer. This just brings it together into the rest of the Mini. With the end now in sight, it was time to base everything. I wanted to try something a little bit new to add a bit of depth to the bases, rather than just using the iron earth like last time, which kind of gave not so much texture and a very flat look to the bases, which is fine for the infantry and the Scutari, but I wanted something more for my characters. So, using some PVA glue mixed with a little bit of water, I added some sand all over the bases and covered this with Martian iron earth. I wasn't overly concerned here about the colour of the sand showing through and the coverage not being 100% with the iron earth, because the way it would dry and crack anyway, you would see some of that colours underneath, and when I applied the Agrax wash over the top, it darkened everything down and really brought it all together, so this was fine. I think I probably made a mistake here by not doing the basing first, because then I could dry brush over the top to really pull out some more texture and probably not have so much sand on it and rocks, basically. The final step is to add a black rim to the edge of all of the bases, and with that, week 3 is done. Next week, for the final week, is Vehicle Week, where I have 6 Cataphrons, a Dune Rider and 2 Dune Crawlers to get through, with the added bonus of learning to use an airbrush. If you want to be notified when that video goes up, please subscribe, and if you're enjoying this series, please drop a like or a comment to let me know what you think. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you again next week.